Hello, everybody. Send me a note. Let me know you're on. So, how are you all doing with the craziness happening right now? Right? This is crazy. So much chaos and disruption and worry. So, if you're anxious about the coronavirus, it makes sense. It's anxiety producing. However, I do think there are things that you can do to lower the unnecessary anxiety that you might be struggling with. So, for the people who are watching this on replay, I'm glad you're getting to watch it. You can post comments, whether you're watching it on Facebook or YouTube. I'm broadcasting live to both. I'll see your comments afterwards and I'll respond as soon as I can. And so, for those of you on Facebook, if you're saying hello, I may or may not be able to see your name because of the software that I'm using. But hi, Sheila. Hi, Jess. Thanks for joining. I see we're getting up there with a number of people on. So say hello. Let me know your name so I know who you are. Facebook users will come across just as Facebook users unless you've given StreamYard permission to use your name. I believe YouTube users, I'll see who you are. But anyway, say hello, and I can always respond to your comments later. So this is kind of nuts what's going on, right? And what I'd like to do today is to talk about a number of things with regard to anxiety and the situation that we're dealing with right now with COVID-19. And hello to all the Facebook users joining on. Welcome. So let's see, I'm wondering where to start. Last week, I was traveling, unfortunately. We left a week ago Thursday, which was a very different world, actually, and I wasn't really concerned about stuff. And we went to the town of Aspen to ski, and there was an outbreak, and it's a little tiny town. So we had to sort of make some choices, and one of my concerns was becoming sick and not being home. I would rather be sick at home. So I was inclined to head home earlier, but you're sort of balancing all these decisions. So we decided to go to a mountain that had no outbreaks, Copper Mountain, and we spent a couple days there, and then we did fly home a little bit early. So one reason I'm mentioning that is that we have these brains that can project into the future, and they can help us anticipate problems and then make choices. And that's all good. When we get stuck in the projection that is just going over and over and over the problems, then that is unproductive anxiety. And what anxiety actually does is set up a stress response in your body, which lowers your immune system, not what you need right now. So we want to work on lowering that stress response. So as I'm kind of talking and we're beginning here, just, send me comments. Let me know, how are you doing? What's your biggest worry? What are you concerned about? How are you feeling? Are you sleeping okay? Are you eating okay? All of those sort of questions. So it's normal to feel anxious, groundless, uncertain with the chaos that's happening. Warning signs would be if you're actually feeling panic. So one of my clients yesterday told me that her heart is racing when she reads news articles and Facebook. She's having full panic symptoms. So when we face a crisis like what's happening right now, we need our whole brain to work. We need full brain thinking to make decisions, balance choices, and our survival response is very, very strong. The part of our brain that controls our survival response, which I would call the reptilian brain, and the amygdala is kind of in between the reptilian and the mammalian brain. But that part of the brain takes over, and that controls our fight, flight, freeze response. And that part of the brain wants to keep us safe. Oh, apologies. Something ringing over here. That part of the brain wants to keep us safe no matter what. Yet it's an old part of the brain. So what it does is it gives us the physiological symptoms that we would need to run away from a saber-toothed tiger. not the physiological symptoms that we need to really plan and consider and make reasonable choices. So what's happening right now, unfortunately, in our society is that the amygdala is taking over so many people, and so many people are in panic mode. So if you find that you are panicking, your heart's racing, you're obsessively thinking about this, you're not sleeping, you're not eating, and all of those things are where anxiety is taking over. And so I see people share worried about getting sick, worried about big gaps in schedule. Of course, the economic impact of this is of a concern. Totally agree. Oh, someone's sharing that they binge information when feeling anxious. So yeah, we're going to come back to that in a little while, because what's happening in your brain with this fight, flight, freeze response is you're pumping adrenaline and cortisol into your body. Adrenaline helps us narrowly focus when we need to, but it is an intense, focus, and it won't let us let go of the topic. So that adrenaline is causing you to think about nothing but the virus, the problem, the economic impact, over and over and over and over. And it's just simply not helpful for you, for your immune system, or for solving whatever problems are going to need to be solved here. So I don't really want to comment too much on the possibilities of getting sick, because I'm not a disease specialist, but pretty much more than 80% of reported cases are very mild. And my guess is a lot of very mild cases are also not being reported. So my guess is the percentage is higher. So certainly for people who have heart disease or other things, they have to stay very, very, very safe and take a lot of extra precautions. But again, worrying about things we can do nothing about is where we cross the line into unproductive anxiety. Worry where we can take steps and do something about it, that's great. So, we can do the social distancing, we can follow the protocols, we can follow what's being recommended in our society right now. And then if you're doing all that, you're doing what you can, that's all you can do. Oh yeah, somebody has to go to the hospital. Yes. And some specific exercises to do. Yes, I'll try to share some specific exercises as well. Yeah, so going into a hospital, you have to, wear a face mask if you want, or like a bandana over your mouth. Do what you need to do to feel safe. Wash your hands, be careful. However, viruses have been in the population forever and ever and ever. And this is just one that is moving very fast through the population. So one of the main reasons for all of the social distancing and everything we're putting in place is simply to keep our hospitals from being overloaded. That's really the main reason for this. It isn't so much that this is so deadly of a disease. It's more to keep the hospitals from being overloaded so that the people who are very sick can be helped. So coming back to this survival response, which does not allow for whole brain thinking. So what does allow for whole brain thinking? Whole brain thinking is supported by diaphragmatic breathing. If you've listened to some of my other talks, you know that I am a big fan of diaphragmatic breathing. And that's actually an exercise that I would recommend everybody do minimum 4 times a day right now, for sort of 4 cycles of a diaphragmatic breath in, a diaphragmatic breath out. If you're not sure what a diaphragmatic breath is, I did do a video in the Facebook group last week on it. And if you're on YouTube, there are many videos on diaphragmatic breathing. So pull one up. Diaphragmatic breathing keeps us in a reasonable emotional range. Diaphragmatic breathing is one of the only ways to communicate to this old part of the brain, I'm safe enough now. Just right now, just at this moment, I don't need to be responding as if I'm under attack. So I know theoretically, many of you probably feel like theoretically you are under attack. There's something coming down in the future. But right now, if you check in with yourself right this moment, just do that for me. Just take a second right now. Let's all do it together. And just take a deep breath. Check in mindfully with where you are right now. Sort of breathe in the atmosphere of the room that you're in. Just kind of pull things down to just this moment. Take another deep breath in. And again, just sort of pull things down just this nanosecond. Are you safe enough right now? Let me know. Just throw me, if you just pull it right back into exactly what is actually happening, the truth, send me a comment about whether right at this second, if we drop all the projections, are you safe enough right at this second? And I just am going to check a couple of comments here. Yeah, Jackie mentioned flattening the curve. That's really the reason for the social isolation, is to flatten the curve, flatten the spread of the disease right now. And for most of us, the vast majority of us, we are not at risk for having anything other than a fairly typical flu. Okay, so specific ideas. Oh, good. Somebody's saying that they loved the diaphragmatic breathing video. Excellent. Yep, keep trying it. Okay, someone is sending a note to me. Yes, safe enough now. You can also send me a thumbs up and let me know. Okay, so you're safe enough now. So this wonderful tool we have as humans that can look into the future, assess risk, and make choices is also what drives us nuts, because we go around and around and around. And I'll give you an example. My daughter and her partner live on a campus in co-op housing, and they called today and they're trying to make the decision. Do they stay? Do they leave? If they leave, whose house do they go to? There's not a perfect answer for some of these questions right now. Like a lot of the time when we have to make decisions with imperfect information, or make decisions that have imperfect choices, like there's no choice that's really, really clear, that can make us really anxious because we go around and around and around and we want a perfect answer. And I think that right now, today, there's no perfect answer. So good. People are commenting, safe enough now, safe enough now. Great. I'd actually like to go into sort of a mini meditation here. Now that people are accessing that feeling of safety right here, right now. Again, if you've gotten off a little bit, just bring it back in, and just right here, right now. Are you safe enough? Can you tap into a little bit of physiological relaxation in your body? And now I'm going to just have you bring up the anxieties that you're feeling. And so you can bring it up with the storyline, economic uncertainty, my job is shutting down, what's going to happen here, I could get sick, let those anxious thoughts come in, and just notice. And I don't know why I have this alarm that continues to go off here, but I gotta turn off my phone. Let those thoughts spin for a second and just notice what shifts in your body. So when you go from feeling that feeling of I'm safe enough now to allowing that story a lot of space in your head, just notice and check in physically what's happening. And send me a note. Just send me a note. Let me know, did your heart rate go up? Your stomach feel a little nauseous? Physically, what happened when you made that shift? And I'm just going to give you a second to sort of check into that. And then I'm going to have you come back to that feeling of anxiety. And what I would like you to do is I'd like you to actually go underneath that feeling. If you take the feeling of anxiety and you drop down under it, Can you find the feelings that are under the anxiety? Okay, so yeah, so people are commenting anxiety in my stomach, heart rate increasing, absolutely. So just take a moment and drop down. You can almost sort of picture the anxiety in your body, and then under it, what are the feelings that are underneath it? And I'm curious what you guys come up with as I ask you this question before I give a little more guidance. So throw me some comments. Underneath that feeling of your chest being tight or your stomach being upset. Under the anxiety is fear and vulnerability. Yep, just commented that. That's completely true. What else? Does anybody else find another feeling underneath the anxiety? Fear. So I tend to think about fear as an in the moment, I have to do something immediately. Anxiety is a little bit more about what happens in the future. Does that make sense? So I tend to think about fear is the feeling that, like, if the saber-toothed tiger was attacking you at that moment, you would feel fear. You would have to jump. If some crisis happens, um, and you have to immediately react. That's how I tend to talk about fear, but other people have different ways of looking at it. Um, Fear and a feeling of being unsafe. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. When I go under anxiety, I very often experience a sense of powerlessness, which is a feeling none of us want to have. And yet, it's actually, we'll come back to it, but accepting it is actually a very useful step. And then sometimes sadness. Like, I think anxiety can protect us from feeling a sense of sadness, and it is sort of sad what's happening right now. It's, um, you know, we are vulnerable. We're toothless, hairless beings existing in this world, and we don't live forever. People we love die. We will die one day. We are vulnerable, like we are. There's no way to get around that. And there is a powerlessness with something like this virus. Like, we can take all of these steps, we still might catch it. I don't actually think catching it is the worst thing for most of us, right? But some of us might have elderly parents or somebody with a very, very compromised immune system in our life. And if they catch it, it might be much more serious. So, yes, this is a real situation. This is not made up. So it's not that there is nothing to worry about, but when we can't do anything about it, it then becomes unproductive. Does that make sense to you guys? So for me, accepting my powerlessness actually is a relief. There's a real relief when I can sort of say, okay, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to make the best decisions in this imperfect world, do what I can, and then turn it over. And this is also where spirituality comes in to anxiety recovery. And spirituality can mean many things. And I know that there are probably a number of people listening who have a strong faith in God. There are probably people listening who do not have a faith in a God, but have some kind of faith in the universe, or that there's a bigger picture beyond us individually. And having some type of spirituality or trust in the universe or framework through which to view why are we here? Why are we born and then we die? And we have some joy, we have some happiness, we have lots of sadness, we have lots of fear. Why does this all happen? So for me, the act of accepting my powerlessness is tapping into my spirituality. It's tapping into my spiritual beliefs that there's, that the universe has its own game plan here, and I'm a small cog. So yeah, somebody's sharing sadness is absolutely there. Her friend is in the epicenter in Italy, and I'm quite fearful and sad for her and her family. Yeah. So we have a number of relatives in Italy, actually. My husband is from Italy. He lived there till he was 14. And one of his uncles is in his 80s and actually was in the hospital before the coronavirus hit Italy. And as far as I know, still to date, hasn't been released from the hospital, even though he didn't have it. He kind of got caught there. And then his son, who happens to be a doctor, isn't allowed in to visit because he's a doctor at a different hospital. And yeah, it's chaos there, and it is sad. And but anticipating grief does not help. We will all experience grief in our life, right? The other thing I want to share is I talked to one friend who's in Italy, and she basically was like, yeah, everything's shut down. It's really sort of a disaster here. And then another person shared that the biggest problem is actually the anxiety, not the disease, from what she's viewing, even in Italy. So I just think that's really important to keep in mind, is that within this chaos, within this uncertainty, within our powerlessness, we need to sort of bring it back down. I'm safe enough now, one day at a time, one moment at a time. So I do want to get to sharing a couple of tips, which somebody asked for, and I will do that. But I'm also thinking about, and this might sound like a silly example, but when my twins, I have 3 kids, and 2 of them are twins. And when the twins were born, I had to travel. It was a job-related issue. It was a very important issue, and I was still breastfeeding. I was nursing them, and they were about 3 months old. So I was getting on an airplane with 2 3-month-olds. And when you have twins, one of the hardest things about twins is that, like, you can't hold them both at the same time. Like when you have one baby, you could comfort the baby and hold it, but with 2 of them, it can be nearly impossible. And so I had some anxiety about getting on an airplane and traveling with the twins. And I decided I'm going to take this moment by moment, not even one day at a time, one micro moment at a time. And I went through that plane ride being like, okay, is this micro moment okay? Is this micro moment okay? And rather than projecting, what happens if they start screaming? What happens if nobody helps me? What happens if they get an earache? I was just like, okay, is this micro moment okay? All right, one of them's crying, but this micro moment's okay. And actually, a woman on the plane offered to help me, and she comforted one while I was comforting the other, and the whole plane ride went fine, but one micro moment at a time. So I know it's a very different type of situation, but hopefully that can translate into how you might be able to manage your anxiety right now. One moment at a time. What can you do about it today? If you can't do anything about it today, take care of yourself. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. So I wrote down 7 tips that I thought might be helpful for you. Number 1, manage your media diet. Having a certain amount of information is helpful. I would stick with, I'd stick with the official sites. Oh, good. Someone said that example was perfect. Good. I'm glad you could relate to that. Yeah. So manage what you're watching. I'm finding with my normal news feed right now on Facebook, it's very hard for me to read it. So I'm avoiding that. But I am once in a while looking up on the CDC website or the WHO website if I want to get a little more information. When I was in Aspen, as I said, I did check regularly, like what's happening here, because that was a tiny town and there was an outbreak of about 10 people. And I'm glad I left early. They did end up closing all the ski resorts, and they are recommending that anybody who was in Colorado at that time self-quarantine. So we are doing that. So there is some news that's very useful, and then there's others, and there's fake stuff going around, and just manage it, just notice. So like the client I was talking to yesterday who said like her heart is racing when she's on Facebook. Stay off of Facebook. And I know it's hard. So anyway, that's one. manage your media diet. Number two, don't isolate, right? So if we're all self-quarantining, we can end up feeling really isolated, but we have such wonderful technology right now. We can FaceTime with one another, Skype, Zoom, phone, text, stay in contact, reach out, make sure you're having at least one good connected social connection a day. So write that down on your list. Try to have one reasonable social connection. And I'm going to tie that into number three, which is talk about other things. Like, yes, it's fine to check in. How are you doing with the coronavirus stuff? How are you doing? How are you feeling? What needs to be done here? However, find other things to talk about. Talk about movies, a book you read, anything else, anything else. So don't allow this part of your brain, remember the adrenaline is going to make you hyper focus on this when you can't do anything differently. So you need to get enough information so that you know what steps to take. But beyond that, it just ends up being counterproductive. And just remember, physiologically, when you get into that fight, flight, freeze mode, you are lowering your own immune system. You are creating pain for yourself that's not necessary. So that's the main thing here, is to really figure out how to balance it. So those were three: manage your media diet, don't isolate, talk about other things. Number four, if you can, be outdoors safely, take a hike, take a walk. The weather is changing here in the Northeast, which is very nice for us. And I think that being outdoors and getting a little sunshine, a little bit of activity is an awesome thing. Number five, diaphragmatic breathing. Mentioned it earlier, mentioning it again. Keep that in mind. Number six is the what can I do today? What can I do this very moment? What can I do today? And we talked about that, really sort of bringing it in. If I'm, worried about my business or my work, like, yeah, those are problems. But if there's nothing you can do today, you have to try to refocus and focus on what is actually happening now and on what you can, if there is anything you can do today. So someone is posting that her friends and she are actually writing and mailing cards to each other and made it a rule not to mention the virus. Awesome. I think that's great. That's really wonderful. And Jess mentions that her daughter has taken a six-week social media break. That's great for a teenager, right? That's awesome. And one micro moment at a time. Good. And then lastly is mindfulness. The last tip is mindfulness, which is very similar to the one day at a time, but really mindfulness of the moment. And even within this chaos, we can experience a lot of pleasure. So taking a shower, a warm shower, which most of us are able to do, is an incredibly delicious experience. So really try to bring in the sensory pleasure of those kind of things. You can cook yourself a good meal. You can have a cup of tea that smells really nicely. You can begin to breathe in the outdoors, the fresh air. You can take a shower, even washing dishes, actually, if you really are mindful about it. I tend to be somebody whose hands are always cold. So when I wash dishes, it's actually fairly pleasant, but don't tell my husband because he'll wonder why I don't do it more. But anyway, but all of these sort of smaller things, using some oils, giving yourself a foot massage, these are all pleasures that we can experience no matter what else is happening. And what these things are doing, just so you don't feel that it's frivolous, because what these things are doing is they're helping your entire brain reorient away from anxiety about something you can't do anything about. So let me know what you think. We're getting towards the end here. I think I covered most of what I wanted to, but I'd love to hear from you. So let me know if you have any other questions. And Jess comments, yes, a hot shower is good for increasing her mood. Yeah, Absolutely. Yeah, and this concept of uncertainty and groundlessness. As many of you know, I'm Buddhist and paid a lot of attention to Buddhist philosophy. So there is within Buddhism this concept of groundlessness, and that all of human existence feels somewhat groundless, and we do whatever we can to pretend it's not groundless, to like pretend we have certainty, and there really is no certainty. So I don't know that going into that notion is very helpful for people who are feeling anxious right now, but experiencing that sense of groundlessness, like, yeah, things are really groundless. Oh, and I know one other thing I want to mention, and someone's saying this helped a lot. Good. I'm really, really, really happy. The other thing I want to mention is routines. Routines are so important. And one of the things that's happening right now is that all our routines are disrupted. So I do think that having routines helps us feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit more certain. So try to do what you can to build back in a routine, even if it's not your normal one. So if you usually go to the gym and you don't want to go to the gym anymore, a little bit of a workout at home, having some set hours to work from home or activities with your kids, moving some kind of routine back into your life for the next couple of weeks, I think would be super important. Great. All right, terrific. Oh, yes, I'm doing aerobic exercise at home, work out the adrenaline. Absolutely. Exercise, super important. And spring cleaning, why not? We're all motivated to clean right now, right? Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. And I will see you all later.